Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle and thank you for joining us at www.sonic-cinema.com. Before we get started, I'd like to invite you to join the Sonic Cinema Patreon at patreon.com. Just search Sonic Cinema and you'll find us. There, the first reward for patrons who pledge $3 and over is already online, with many more coming down the pike, which include commentaries from the Yahoos with a microphone that you've never heard before, as well as excerpts from the book that I'm writing, Why is the Rabbit Wearing Sunglasses? A Lifetime Through Movies. So you can find that at www.patreon.com. Just search Sonic Cinema and Brian Scuttle and you'll find me. Today, I'm pleased to finally be able to bring on to the podcast Jakob Billinski. He's a writer and director that I've been going back and forth with, bringing to the podcast for an interview for a while now. He has gone back and forth through between short films and feature films. His most recent is Three Tears of Bloodstained Flesh, which is a feature that you can find. And then his previous feature was Shade of Grey. And then his two shorts, which I've seen, are Foxy McDonough versus the Black Death and Obsolescence. So we're going to probably touch on all of those topics, the films they is inspired by, and just filmmaking in general. So please welcome to the podcast, Jakob Billinski. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Jakob Billinski. He is a writer and director who sent me a few of his films over the past few years, a couple of shorts, a couple of feature films, and really excited to talk to him. He's got a very interesting style that he's worked in as far as his films have gone, so I'm really looking forward to asking him a few questions. Jakob, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, so the first question I kind of ask every filmmaker is probably one of the more basic ones. I'm sure it's one you've heard many times before. Is what inspired you to go into filmmaking?
Well, I've kind of always had this weird obsession with movies. When I was a kid, I always referred to myself as an indoor kid. Everyone else was wanting to go outside and play sports, and I was like, let's go inside and watch Die Hard. So I don't know, man. I just always found myself getting lost in the stories. There was something magical. I know it sounds kind of cliche, just about seeing these other worlds come to life on, the TV screen in my living room, or the screen in the theater. It just always fascinated me a little bit more than normal life. I don't know, maybe it's finding an affinity for escapism or whatnot, but I remember just always kind of that art form spoke to me. I used to want to be, I always had a thing, like when I grew up, I wanted to be a comic book artist or an animator, but I never really had the patience for that. But, like the idea of like storytelling in visual form just always interested me. And I remember it was senior year of high school. We had this, there was this class that I was in. It was like a sort of an advanced placement English class. And we had to create a final project that would just expand on anything that we studied earlier in the year. And I had fallen into this obsession with Shakespeare and specifically Hamlet as a story. And I thought, cool, I want to try to make a film out of that. So naively, I was like, let's make a 15-minute modern version of Hamlet with me and my friends who can't act. And it was terrible, but in my mind it was cool, and I replaced all the swords with guns, and I kind of got in a little bit of trouble because we were high school kids doing gunfights, and this was like right before Columbine happened, so I kind of stirred a little crap at my school with that, and they were like, you can't do that again. I'm like, okay. But like I said it to like Nine Inch Nails and just everything that I was into at the time, and I was like, this is great. It's crap. It's terrible. It's buried on a VHS, and you'll never ever see it. But it kind of got this like standing ovation from the class, and I was the I mean, I always talked in class. I was kind of disruptive, like report cards that I always had that talk successively. So I was kind of doing my own thing in the corner, but I was also kind of at the same time the quiet, shy kid that just sort of like drew in the back of the class. And like I had my tiny circle of friends, but not like broad. I wasn't like into how high school's really cliquish or whatever. I didn't have like friends in all different categories. I had my little like group of friends, and all of a sudden I had people that I'd never talked to coming up being like, oh man, that was really, really cool. And like, I didn't really know what to do with that. It's just something that I enjoyed doing and it made sense to me. And I remember thinking, I worked 10 times harder on that stupid little short than I did on anything else, like in school or really in life. Like, more than any art project or anything. It's just, I didn't sleep for like 3 days. And this was, showing my age a little bit, like I was like, I had 2 VCRs hooked up and I was like dubbing it, like, with like the left channel from one tape to the other. That's how I was editing my shots. And I had like my Discman, like with my CDs queued up into the right channel. So I was like doing the soundtrack. It was crap, but like, I didn't know how to do that. I was literally figuring it out from scratch. Like, oh, I think this is how you put something together, trying to reverse engineer what I saw in a movie, with this footage that I made with my friends in my backyard. And I don't know, like that, figuring that out was just really rewarding to me. And I remember thinking I worked 10 times harder on that than I did anything else, but it never really felt like work. And people seem to respond to it. They're crazy. Again, it's crap. But like that feeling kind of planted a seed in me, and like, that, or like how I felt then. And it stuck with me, and I carried that through into college. And I thought, maybe this is the kind of visual storytelling that I think I want to do. And somewhere along the line, I transitioned from like, watching movies to, like, how you observe something for so long and then you think, I want to try that. I want to see if I can do that. And it just sort of, next thing I knew, I was just like, oh, cool. Filmmaking, that makes sense to me. Let's figure that out. And I really never looked back. I never really figured out a plan B. I was just like, this is what makes sense to me. That's what I want to do. Even if people don't like it, this is what I want to do. So, let's try to find a way to make that work. And, I guess as far as the inspiration, I mean, just like all the stuff that I grew up watching, I was obsessed with Hitchcock from a pretty early age. I remember right around that time, I decided, I think I want to be a filmmaker. I had a handful of films that changed the way that I looked at movies, because back then I was like, I was a teenage boy. I was like, if it had explosions and boobs, I was like, cool, this is a movie. But I never really thought of it as an art form. And then I saw, this is super trite, but I don't care. Like, I saw Pulp Fiction, and that kind of blew my mind from like a narrative storytelling standpoint. And so of course, I'm one of those people. Like, Tarantino made me want to be a filmmaker, but it kind of did. It was that and Train Spotting. I remember those films affected me pretty hard, and I thought, how do I do that? And then shortly after that, I took this class in college and got opened up to stuff I'd never heard before, which is like very near and dear to my heart now. Like, I remember I saw Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal and Fellini's 8.5, and those 2 movies made me think, I don't understand what cinema is at all. I need to rethink this, and I loved that. I was like, they challenged me and kind of made me think of what was on screen in a way that I wasn't used to, and honestly wasn't comfortable with at the time, but I liked. Like it was a good kind of discomfort. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it definitely makes sense. And going back to what you were talking about earlier, where it's like you had this urge where it's like, oh, well, you look at something and you think, oh, I want to do that. Maybe I could do that. I kind of had that feeling when I first started, because I played music. I'd been a trombonist for about a decade or so, from middle school and high school and stuff like that. But it was when I listened to James Horner's score for Braveheart, that's what made me think, I'd like to do film music. What if I could do something like that? And then that led me into composing. That led me into, and then later on, I majored in music industry. Sound recording. I didn't necessarily know the first thing about that, but I knew I was interested in it. And it's like, what do I have to do in order to do that? So yeah, I definitely understand that impulse. And I mean, yeah, you mentioned, yeah, it is kind of cliche for somebody in our basic generation to say, "Oh, Tarantino, Pulp Fiction, and Train Spotting inspired me to make movies." But the fact of the matter is, I get it because those are great movies. So of course they're
Yeah.
going to inspire you to make movies. Which actually leads me to one of the things that interested me when I went back to look at your films before this is both Foxy Madonna versus the Black Death and Three Tears on Bloodstained Flesh very much feel to me like they have a very 70s exploitation cinema vibe to them. And I was wondering if that was something that, if that's a genre that, and talking about your Hamlet project in high school made me think, is that a particular genre or is that a particular style that you've seen yourself sort of go into and be inspired by more than others?
Just like 70s, like grindhouse and exploitation cinema specifically.
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily 70s, but I mean, it could be 80s. Just really
Yeah.
low budget, grimy, blood and guts. Just very simple stories, but done very strongly in terms of the style. Because there is a very
Yeah.
distinct style I've kept up with in terms of your films.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I definitely, I've kind of always responded to, like stylized cinema. I mean, I do think there is such a thing as like, going too far into the style over substance category, but yeah, like 70s and 80s cinema visually and structurally it's been something that, that's what I kind of grew up watching predominantly, but I definitely think that there's sort of a charm to those like low budget movies that sort of like you can see like they're kind of held together with duct tape almost.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like the first Evil Dead, for kind of like like when you or even Evil Dead 2, when you're like, oh, I can see the scenes on the puppet and the strings and everything, I'm just like, that's just kind of magical and part of the charm to me. I think I don't know, like it's weird because, and I'm not trying to get into like a larger discussion, but like there's this idea of like exploitation being a bad thing, which it definitely can. I think definitely more so today, but I also kind of I just grew up liking those types of films where everything was like uninhibited and not restricted, and like it's just so egregious and over the top that it almost spins right back around to being charming, if that makes sense. I'm like, yes,
Oh, yeah.
I know that everything is just sort of like it's trashy stories about terrible people doing terrible things, but it's like it's so almost hyperbolic that it's kind of endearing. And they were so over stylized. Like I remember, like I one of my favorite subgenres is giallos. Like obviously, I think you can probably tell that with Three Tears, but like I remember the first time I saw an Argento movie, I was just like, what the hell is this? This is amazing. And I like, the use of color and how it's almost like, it's like it wants to be a musical, but it's not. It's just like visually so like theatrical and over the top. And like, it's like all the light sources are so unconventional. It's like that wouldn't be there, but it works. And, it's just, like that blood is just like, that's like red paint, but it's kind of awesome. And I don't know. It's like so overly theatrical. I just love that. And, you go in the grindhouse cinema, you get so many different, like, you've got the, like blaxploitation, women in prison movies, and like kung fu, like all the little like subgenres under like exploitation and grindhouse. I mean, which I think is kind of a little bit of a lost form. Like if you show, I think a lot of those movies to modern audiences, they would just be like, "What is this trash?" And it's like it's trash, but that's kind of the point. And there's a weird charm to it. I'm kind of force pumping through what I'm trying to say, but like I remember when that's going back to Tarantino, that Tarantino Rodriguez like double feature Grindhouse came out. And like I was like all about that, but I remember when I saw it in the theater, just nobody got it. They just didn't understand the idea of like a double feature drive-in, like a drive-in double feature, like where they would just kind of have these two films back to back. I remember the credits came up on Planet Terror and people were walking out. I'm like, dude, that's like half the movie.
Yeah.
Hang on. So they didn't get it, and they're like, why is this so? These characters, like, they're speaking so unrealistically, and it's so like kind of like a very exploitative, but that's the type of cinema back then. I mean, like, you know, every era has their own. Like, you know, you look at like, you know, 50s or, you know, 60s, like, you know, with Tarantino. I'm sorry, wow, I screwed that up. The 60s was like, you know, Scorsese's, like, you know, films that he put out then, and like, you know, even like, you know, German expressionism. Like, you have all these different like types of film, like little moments in film history that sort of was in the structure and the style of the times, and it doesn't always translate to like modern day, but like it's just as being a fan of cinema, like all encompassingly, you know, regardless of it's like modern or old. Like I don't know. I'm not really getting my point across here. I found that type of film like really, I don't know, it speaks to me. I can't really put my finger on why. I relate to it. Like, I'm like, yeah, I love Jawas, and not just because, okay, pretty colors, but, you know, I find that kind of endearing. Like, you know, it's sort of like, okay, cool, they tried to make like a sleazy European like trash version of Hitchcock movies, which is kind of what they were in response to. And it just, I don't know, it works for me. Like, you know, and with Foxy Madonna, when we did that, I remember the trailer for Grindhouse had come out, and that was one of those 48-hour films, you know, like where you go and you have to make a movie in a weekend. And I had the team together. We were up in Indianapolis, and, you know, they give you your, you know, you have to like write it after they give you your category, like, you know, your genre and like all the little elements that you have to make sure to incorporate throughout the shoot.
Right.
And, you know, we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And I was thinking, well, everybody's going to want to, you know, try to do like every little indie movie that people try to do. They try to do something either like, you know, really overly dramatic and serious and like we're making art, or they try to do something like really, which is fine. I mean, I love that too, but like, or, you know, they try to do something like really, really funny, and they try to do like, you know, like a 10-minute version of like Clerks or something. Like, oh, let's just lean on the comedy. Well, I was like, no one's gonna try to do like an exploitation action movie. Let's do that. I was like, screw it. Let's have fun, you know. And I don't know. I guess, you know, I was thinking about like stuff like, you know, like Shaft and Dolomite and everything, and I was like, let's just try to do something like that. So it was, I don't know, it was fun, and I was like, I don't really, and I went into it thinking like, I don't care if anybody likes this, I just want us to have a good time. And it ended up, it's weird, it's funny to hear you bring that up, because oddly enough, like that's still, I think, the short that everybody is quickest to mention, like, oh yeah, that Foxy Madonna movie. I'm like, yeah, that was fun. And so it's definitely dated now. Like, I have trouble watching it, but it was a lot of fun. I don't know. I know I didn't really answer your question. I just sort of talked around it, but like I love that type of cinema, man. It's just fun. It's not for everybody. I get it, because I think a lot of people are easily, well, not easily, because if you're offended, you're offended. But like I know a lot of people are like offended by that type that type of cinema, because it's like, yes, it is very trashy and exploitative and everything, but also it's kind of impossible to offend me. So I can sort of take most things with a grain of salt. I'm like, yeah, sure, it's wrong, but I kind of like it. You know, and again, it's a movie. It's fake. You know, I tend to have a very thick fantasy versus reality separation barrier. I'm like, I know these are real people playing real things and there's real stories behind there, but what's on the screen is ultimately like a fake reality. And I don't know. That's the magic world that I like to live in. So
no, that's fine. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, I mean, I certainly, you know, that's one of the things that struck me. I watched when I rewatched Foxy Madonna. I knew I really loved it when I first saw it, but I completely. It's the first time in a few years that I'd seen it again, and I remembered why I liked it. I remembered why I enjoyed it, and it's because of the fact that it's got, and I forgot the horror aspect of that. Like I remembered, you know, the images and stuff like that. I remembered having that feel to it, that 70s grindhouse feel to it, but I completely forgot the horror aspect of the story, or the supernatural aspect of the story. And it's like, oh wow, I completely forgot about that. And it's one of those things where certainly in that and Three Terrors, I definitely notice both of those especially. I mean, all four of your movies that I've seen are really there's a very strong visual style to them. And with Three Terrors in particular, where was it that how did you come up with the visual style of that film?
Visual style. At the time, I was trying to look for. Well, I was looking for like what was going to be my next project. You know, I had done Shade of Grey, like my first feature, and then there was like a long gap where I did like some shorts and music videos and whatnot. But I was like, okay, I'm not sure what to do for the next feature. And I remember I had a couple scripts that I had written that I tried getting off the ground, like, oh, let's make this, and it just, you know, and sometimes you try to get a project off the ground and it doesn't launch. So I'd had a couple of those, and I was talking with Bill Govan, my lead actor and then co-producer, and we'd been looking for something to work on together for a while, and he asked me, like, you know, hey, is there a project that you have, you know, written that I could be in? I was like, oh, I don't really have anything where I think, you know, you fit in that I've written right now. I was like, well, would you want to write one? And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, why not? Let's write a new thing. And so he's like, well, what kind of movie do you want to make? And then at the time he asked me, you know how you have kind of like what we were just talking about, you have like these stretches where you're just like, I'm really into this right now. Like, you know, like I am really into, you know, like Kung Fu cinema, or I'm really into, you know, like, you know, slashers, or, you know, whatever. I'm just picking random genres. But, you know, and at that time I was in a deep giallo rabbit hole. I mean, you know, just like rewatching a lot of my favorites and digging up ones that I hadn't seen. And I just sort of was like on a binge of that. And I was like, I want to try that. But, you know, I never wanted to just like sit down and try to like emulate one. That's why I always refer to Three Terrors as like a modern Midwestern spin on the giallo. And that's sort of like what I was trying, which kind of, I don't know, I guess you could say that sounds pretentious, but like, you know, I didn't want to be like, I'm being imitative. You know, I wanted to try to do something that paid, you know, appropriate homage to that sect of cinema, but also kind of did its own thing. And I you know, so I kind of approached the visual style as like a cross between like I specifically like 70s giallos and like kind of like independent like revenge thrillers, you know, like I had a lot of like you know, thinking stuff like Get Carter, you know, and whatnot. Okay. And I was thinking of well, this is more modern, but I recently watched that movie. Was it the Horseman or whatever, which is sort of like this revenge story. I think that's right. Horseman, not Horseman. Horseman. It's like a Australian revenge thriller. So I was sort of like, okay, well, let's see if we can mix like the, you know, not hard-boiled detective, but like, you know, like on a mission trying to figure out uncover the secrets of what's going on in the town type revenge thriller mixed with giallo. And then the linking point for me was I had just recently watched The Wicker Man. I'm like, that's how it goes together. It's like this cult, you know? So I was like, cool. So we have like the giallo masked slasher with, you know, there's a wrongful death. And then I was like, okay, cool. So there's a Wicker Man vibe. And, you know, I feel weird because I'm name dropping movies. I wasn't like, let's just copy these. But, you know, like that's sort of, I guess, the influences at the time. But for the visual style, I wanted it to feel sort of like a cross between, like I wanted a lot of the, like I guess the murder set pieces, you know, like you know, the bit with the fingernails, the toothpicks under the fingernails, or the intestine scene, or like the scenes at the morgue, and you know, like, you know, I wanted like really, you know, exaggerated, unconventional uses of color, and, you know, like sort of very stylized cinematography with you know, kind of not just point and shoot angles, but like, you know, let's get the camera in very weird spots and okay, cool, but turn it. You know? when in doubt, make it a Dutch angle. I don't know. Like, but I wanted it to be sort of exaggerated and fun, and but the bits where, you know, like the action sequences, like the fights, not like the kill sequence, but like, you know, the fights where Dominic's just sort of like, you know, killing everybody around him, or, you know, like interrogating somebody. Like I wanted those to kind of have a sort of like that gritty, like investigative, like detective revenge thriller vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I somewhere along the line just kind of blended the two. I worked really close with. It was actually the first time that I ever got to work with who's been one of my best, like, favorite collaborators ever, and has been a pseudo regular director of photography for me since DP Bunnell. He came down. We'd been friends for a while, and talked about how we wanted to work on a project together, but we never had. I mean, we both crewed on other shoots before,
Mm-hmm.
but never like on one of ours. So we were kind of fans of what each other were doing. We're like, hey, we'd like to work together on something. And I was like, hey, you want to come down and just spend a week in Evansville and like shoot this thing with me? And he's like, cool. I'm like, he came down without a crew title. Honestly, I was just like, just come down and like be like my left or right hand, and we'll just figure it out. And just because I was like, we want to work together. So I came down and hung out, and then I was going into the film as the director of photography. So like I knew the script front and back. I'd been planning it for a while. I actually tried to get it off the ground once about a year and a half before we shot it, and then shelved it because that was one of those failure to launch projects, mm-hmm. and then dug it back up later. So okay. I'd been sitting with like the movie in my head for I'm trying to remember the timetable. It's been a minute now, but like at least a year. I already like planned everything out visually, and I could shoot this movie yesterday. So I went into it like I'm going to be the director of photography just to kind of, because I knew we were going to shoot quicker. I don't like to do that because it's sort of, I like shooting a lot, but when you're directing and the director of photography, sometimes it feels like you're, giving half of the pie to one and half to the other. And I kind of prefer just to focus on directing, but I knew that would be one less, I was financing the film myself, pretty much. It was very independent. And I was like, I'll just be able to move faster if that's one less person I have to talk to because I know what I want. Mm-hmm. And so I started shooting, and then, DP was there, and we started going through everything. As we was like, well, what do you want the scene to be like? And I was like, okay, well, this is how we're going to shoot. We're going to shoot over here. And then I was like, why don't we run two cameras? And I said, you stand over here, and like, you handle this angle, and I'll handle this angle, and we'll just get 2 in 1, and we'll move a little bit faster. And I was like, okay, well, that worked. Why don't we do that again, but over here? And he was like, but you know what? I think I could take what you want to do and make it better by doing this. And he would always find this way of taking what I want and improving it. And then it started to shift. And next thing I know, we were both the directors of photography. And then, from then on, after we worked, I was like, okay, you're the DP now. I was like, I'm just gonna do what I do, and I'm gonna trust you with the camera because he's way better at it. Mm-hmm. The dude's just kind of a genius. But anyway, like it was that's sort of where it came from. Like I wanted it to be sort of a blend of those styles, and I knew what I wanted, and I started shooting, and then next thing I know, like David and I were kind of running in tandem, and it sort of evolved from there. It changed a lot as we shot. I think that's most movies do that, but like I went in very specific, knowing what I wanted, and we didn't get exactly that. We changed a lot, but mm-hmm. I like what we were doing better, than what I planned. Sometimes when you're on set, you have to be open, I think, to it's not happy accidents. That's a shitty way of putting it, but it's more like you have to be open to inspiration in the moment. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, we have this plan, but we didn't see this, everybody on set and everybody in costume and in character and everything. It's like, oh, well, this is a better idea. Yeah, let's try that. And there was a lot of experimenting, which I like, because that's fun, that's new and fresh and exciting. So, yeah, I got a little away from your question there. I tend to do that. Sorry.
That's perfectly all right. And the fact that it's kind of amazing to me. I guess I don't know. Even though we're friends on Facebook, I guess I didn't realize that you had financed the film yourself. I mean, that for me makes it all the more impressive. Just the way it looks and the sort of the ambition behind it. There is a lot of It does feel very ambitious as far as a project, and not just because of the fact that it ended up being 2.5 hours long. I mean, that's a big project right there. And I mean, it's a big idea as well. So yeah, I mean, the fact that you self-finance that is extremely impressive.
Well, yeah, as I said that, I actually wasn't thinking, oh shit, is that something I really want to talk about? But the movie's out now, so whatever. Let's talk about it. Yeah, that wasn't actually always the plan. Bill and I, when we were putting the project together, and we were the producers, but we had a couple other producers / investors on board, and sometimes things fall through. So it was one of those where, like, okay, do we regroup? We already have everybody in place, and like the dates, and I was like, it was one of those where I hit I am making this movie no matter what wall.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was the second time I tried to we tried to put it together, and I was just like, no, we're making. We said we were making a movie this fall. I'm making a movie this fall, and it was one of those where I just decided I scaled back a few things so I could make it obviously a little more manageable just for myself to handle because so like some of the set pieces were like, okay, cool, well, we don't have this anymore, so now we're moving this to a different location that I already have. So like I did change a few things to accommodate for me to be able to realistically do that, but it was one of those where like everybody who was working on it believed in the project. I really believed in the project, and I was in we're making this hell or high water mentality. So just found a way to make it work, and called in a lot of favors, like a lot of favors. I had a amazing cast and crew. I know every director says that, but like I really, really did, who had my back and chipped in and supported like the project tenfold, but also like a lot of just behind the scenes, like that's why I had like all special thanks in there. Just people like yeah, cool, I'll help you out here. Yeah, sure, yeah. We'll give you a meal for your crew here this day. Like just like I had a lot of any favor I racked up over everything that I'd done. I was like this is me calling it in, please help. And we split together, but it was as far as the runtime, yeah, that was the script was not short by any means, but new scenes were sort of added as we were shooting. Like sort of like, oh, okay, well let's film this. Let me rewrite this scene real quick, and we'll do like a connective tissue moment here. And like there were parts where I let the actors just sort of like ad lib. I'm like, yeah, I'm very specific on my dialogue, but also continue the conversation just as long as you get these points out. And I let them go a little bit, and we ended up with some really good moments that you can't plan for, like where it's like the little brief moment of reality. And so a lot of I kept a lot of that stuff in the film. The first cut, though, when I put it together, I was like, okay, no one will ever see it. I still have a Blu-ray screener I made of it, but my first cut without credits was like 3 hours and 16 minutes, I think.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, cool, this is longer than Titanic. And I sat down and watched it. It had like no color grading, no effects, no sound design, no score, no nothing. It was just my kitchen sink edit of the movie. And I sat down and watched it one night, and honestly didn't totally hate it. But then I was like, cool, we got to make this workable. And I just kept cutting it back. And I went through a few iterations. I actually had an edit that I really liked. It was about 2 hours and 40 minutes or 2:45, somewhere in that ballpark. But again, just that's ridiculous. I'll be the first to admit, the movie is too long for an indie as it is, but it is the version of the story that I wanted to put out there.
Oh yeah.
And I got to the point where I was trimming stuff out to where I felt like I was verging on, okay, this isn't the story that I want to tell. And again, it was completely independent. I was like, I have this chance where like I don't owe a runtime or a certain type of movie to anyone. I'm just making the thing that I want to make. And I was like, do I want to stand by that, or do I want to be like, oh, let's compromise that? It did affect on festivals, like we didn't get as much festival play because runtime. And I knew that going into it. I wasn't naive about that. But, and I went in thinking, okay, well, if I need to do a different edit for, the release, like when seeking distribution, I went in open to, okay, I would make a truncated cut, and I was like, cool, I'll have two versions. This is my director's cut, and then if I make a shorter version, like a distributor's like, no, we need to have it down here. I was like, cool, I'll be open to that, because I would rather people see it than nobody did. But then Unearthed Films came along, and I mean, bless them, I got to give them credit. Like, love the film as is. And, we're like, no, put it out this way. And I was like, cool, well, here's all the deleted scenes and stuff I cut. But, So I actually, that was the nice thing. In the end, I got to put out the version of the movie that I wanted. I know it's long, and I know, for some people that might be like, oh, well, that's too like indulgent or masturbatory or just like excessive. But I was like, it is the movie that I wanted to make, and for better or worse, I'm really happy that I got to put that version out there. The one compliment I've gotten, I'm actually curious, like, the runtime, but does it feel that long? Like, to you? Because a lot of people tell me they're like, they're like, when they see the runtime, if you're not watching it as you're watching it like on the front of your DVD or Blu-ray player, it's like they're like, I didn't know it was that long. It didn't feel that long. I'm like, okay, good, because I didn't want it to, But
I think there were times for me where it felt that long, but at the same time, there were definitely a lot of times where you didn't feel the runtime at all. You really, there are times where you definitely don't feel the runtime at all. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, there were times where it felt a bit long, but at the same time, I mean, there's not a whole lot there where I'm like, oh, I mean, I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know why you're doing that. I mean, ultimately, everything felt like it was part of the story that you were telling. I mean, I think ultimately, that's the important thing. I mean, it really does boil down to that. So
I ended up with how like hindsight 2020. Obviously, like having a lot of distance from the movie. Like I was in like a hellish editing hole for a very long time with that, just trying to figure out how to make it work. And I got to the point where I just started showing like some of the longer rough cuts to people. I'm like, what doesn't work? Just to get some opinions, because I was like, I'm looking at this thing so much, I'm not sure what else to take out. And I got good notes from I had like a little brain trust of people that I knew were going to give me honest criticism and not just be like, yep, that's fine. They'll be like, this sucks. I'm like, cool. I want to know that because I want the movie to be as good as it could. But I'm like you. That's totally fair. That wasn't like a loaded question when I asked you. Like I do think parts of it are too long. I'm not going to argue things like that's too long. I know you're totally right. It is very long. But I can see parts now that if I were going back and editing it now, I probably would change or remove, and they would be more deleted scenes. But again, it got to the point where I was like, they were willing. Unearthed was awesome putting it out as is, and I was a little worried because I'd already reworked it so much. Like you get that sort of George Lucas syndrome where you're like, I could re-edit this movie for the rest of my life, and I was like, this is a timestamp of what I made at this point in my, career, filmography or whatever, like this is what I made at that point, and then and cool, timestamp, move on, like I just and not like, oh, I hate you, I'm done with you, Three Tears, but like I there's no point I saw in like living that forever. I'm happy with what it was, even with its flaws. I mean, it's very flawed, but like I'm never going to make a perfect film. I don't pretend to think that it's perfect. I like it for what it is, even with its rough edges.
Yeah, and I mean, and the fact of the matter is, I mean, what you said is absolutely true. It's like there does come to be a point where you just kind of have to step away from it and just put it to bed. And I mean, that's. I mean, yeah, it's like you see moment. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned George Lucas, Ridley Scott with Blade Runner and stuff like that, where it's like there are multiple cuts of that, multiple versions of that. But the fact of the matter is, it's like at some point you just need to just say, okay, I'm done with this. I'm done with this. It's where I want it to be. And yeah, of course, after the fact that you will probably go back and go, well, maybe if I had done that differently, maybe if I had done that differently, it's like, of course, it's natural to, it's natural to rethink things after the fact, but at a certain point, you just need to say, I'm happy with what's out here right now, and it's what it needs to be. So yeah,
I totally agree. I think oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
No, I'll give you. I agree with you with Ridley, except I will say I actually really, really like and kind of prefer the final cut of Blade Runner. So
I do too. I will admit I do too.
Like that one just kind of brought it together. But I know what you mean. There's like Blu-ray. I have like 5 cuts of it.
Yeah.
So, but I that's actually like one thing that it's hard for me to do. Like, it's whether I'm writing or editing. It's like anytime you're putting something together, you know, whether it's in script form or, you know, like a visual, like, you know, in an edit form, it's really, okay, there was this moment, like, you know, like I said before, I was like, okay, cool, I want to be like a, you know, not a graphic artist, but like, you know, like a comic book artist or you know, an animator or something. But I remember I was working on this painting in high school, and I you know, it was an oil painting, and I kind of got I'd been working on it for weeks. I remember my teacher was like, why aren't you done with it? I was like, because it's not right. I was like, it sucks, it's not there. And she's like, well, and I was up there, I was like, well, this color's not blending right, and I don't like how this is over here. You know, that's just, you know, I keep, you know, repainting over this, you know, I don't even remember what the painting was at this point, if it was you know, a landscape or what. Like, I completely put it out of my mind. But I remember I was obsessed with trying to get it right, and I couldn't, and it was driving me nuts. And she, you know, I was like right up there, like my nose right up to the canvas working on it. I remember she's like, you know, stop, put it down, you know, put the brush down, walk across the room. I was like, what? She's like, walk halfway across the room. So I did. And she's like, turn around and look at it. And I did. And she's like, is it done? And I was like, yeah. And that's when she, you know, she kind of was like, okay, and this is why. she's like, if you have your nose up there and you're looking at, like, you know, under a microscope, like zoomed in at every little detail, nitpicking every little thing, you will never be happy with it. It will never be finished. But if you step back and look at the image as a whole, you're like, oh, okay, cool, it's finished. I mean, of course, if you get in close, you're going to see all the problems and rework it and everything. And that thought kind of stuck with me. I guess more in editing than in writing. Like, you know, yeah, you know, getting the script, you know, the final version of the script ready, like that, there's a little bit of that there, but really in the edit, like, I just always kind of remember that moment, because that was sort of an eye-opening moment whenever she taught me that. It was just, you know, there is a moment you have to step back and look at the whole, because if, you know, you're looking at, and you got to remember that when I try to remember that when I'm directing too, because, like, you know, you're not just looking at this shot or in an edit, this cut, or really furthermore, like this scene. You're like, what scene comes, where does it land with the scene that comes before and after it, and how do those scenes work within that act, and how does that act work within the film as a whole? And like, eventually you just look at it and you're like, cool, this is the whole machine. And it's hard to see that sometimes, because when you're up in it, like, I mean, the best thing I need to do sometimes is, whenever I'm having trouble, is just walk away from something for a while, which is hard when you have a deadline and you're like, I need to get this done, like, for, you know, a festival, or, you know, if it's like an independent project and you're doing it for someone else, like, you know, whether it's like a freelance thing for a client or something, like, you have to sometimes, like, you know, like, I do a music video for a band, and like, we have to premiere it at this date. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, sometimes I have to rush the edit a little more than I like, because if you hit a wall, you want to walk away from it and just, you know, think about anything but that and come back with fresh eyes. And on your own film, if you set your own deadlines, you definitely have that freedom a little bit more. But I think that's important to a degree. But anyway, there's that thought.
No, that's fine. One of your another one of your earlier films I watched was a short film that you did, Obsolescence. That's what you.
Oh, Obsolescence.
Obsolescence. That's duh. Where did the idea for that come from? Because I really, rewatching it, I thought it was an interesting little paranoia thriller.
Yeah, that was a fun thing to do. I did that with who's my partner in crime on that, Scott Gagno. Whenever I was out and went out to LA for a festival screening for Shade of Grey, and, you know, we were like, wanted to make something while we were there. So I, you know, he's like, okay, cool. Well, you know, what do you want to do? It's your first time in LA, because I hadn't been there before. He's like, do you want to go see this? You want to see that? I'm like, no, I want to make a movie. So we floated around ideas that we had to each other, like, you know, okay, well, here's an idea or treatment I wrote for the script that I never did, or here's like a log line. We were just kicking ideas back and forth, and we ended up settling on that one, which was an old idea that, like, I never really, like, fleshed out further. And we sat down and wrote that in, man, that came together quick. Like, I started writing a version of that script from the idea as my flight got delayed, and I was like in a layover in Texas. And you know, so I'm sitting here like writing before I got on the plane. I get out there, showed him pages, and he's like, this sucks. And he's like putting like red X's through it. And like, we're on 2 different computers. And then like he would send me something. I'm like, nope, I'm never going to put that in my movie. Like we were just like, it was a really good back and forth because we were like brutally honest with each other. Like, I like this, I hate that. And eventually we kind of beat each other's work up to the point where we found we liked that concept, and we thought it was a pretty good, we found something that we thought was pretty good that we were happy with, and wrote that in like across like 2 days or something, and then sent it out to. We called in favors. Like I had he knew some actors there, and then I knew an actress that was out there, and we were just like called in like, hey, do you guys want to be in this short film? We're going to shoot it really quick. And they're like, cool. We're like, all right, here's the script. We're shooting in the morning. See you in like a few hours. And we just literally showed up. People were learning the lines right before we shot it. And I was thinking, this could totally fall apart, but I'm coming back with a souvenir film. And that actually ended up being like one of the better, more productive shoots. I mean, we shot it in like, I think we only shot it in 12 hours. It was like an 8-hour day and a 4-hour day. It went really, really fast. Yeah, it was the crazy production. And like, the scenes with Scott and Jen Lilly, who plays Annie, like when they were on the beach, and I directed them, and then like they had just learned their lines, like literally like on the drive over there, and I am walking backwards, running camera, holding the boom mic on a pole between my knees, so like I'm literally like doing boom and camera and directing, and I'm like, I didn't have headphones, so I was like, I hope I can hear you over the waves. It was I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually kind of amazed that thing turned out as well as it did. But it was fun, and we had a good time on it. But then I mean the idea was sort of we knew we wanted to do something kind of cerebral, and Scott loves sci-fi. I mean I do too, but like he definitely does more than me. So like we like the idea of doing this sort of thriller that had a sci-fi twist, which you don't really know about until it gets the spoiler reveal towards the end. But this idea of like loss and like someone like kind of going into revenge thriller mode because they this relationship that fell apart, like this love that they lost, and just like how that was like the emotional through line, and then we were like, oh cool, that would dovetail well into this sci-fi twist, and it's almost like there's a genre shift when you get to there. And that just came from like a lot of like I said, beating up each other's works, and like I think we both pulled from older ideas that we had that you have all these ideas sitting around that you never really flesh out. Like, oh, that'd be a cool movie one day. So and we just sort of combined them. But yeah, that was a really fun collaborative process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another. And you mentioned it because of the fact that you were going out to LA for a film festival for Shade of Grey, which was your first feature, correct? You've only done the 2.
The 2 that I'll claim. I have a few that I made throughout like college and high school that are just, I mean, those are deep in the vault. They're buried. Yeah. But yes, the 2 that I've actually put out there.
Okay.
So far, I have a third in the works, and I'm trying to get another one off the ground. But yeah, 2 so far.
Okay. I had forgot it'd been. I just watched it a week or 2 ago. For the first time since I think I reviewed it. So it's been about 9 years since I had seen it. I had forgotten one interesting hook Shade of Grey has, where it's basically the history of this room in a hotel, and I was curious if you had any particular inspirations for it, or what the basic inspiration for that movie was.
That's actually kind of a weird story. That one, okay, again, we're always hardest on our own work. I can't look at that movie. I have trouble. Same thing with Three Terrors. Like, I love Three Terrors. Like, I'm very, very proud of it. I kind of never want to watch it again. How like you just like get to that point where every once in a while I'll dig it up and people are like, I want to see it, but I haven't seen it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll watch it with you. But it's just like, oh, I can do better now. Come on. But Shade of Grey was, I wanted to. It was right around the time in my life where I'm like, okay, I want to make a movie. And I actually set out, I thought it was going to be a short. And then I started writing it, and it got a little bit bigger, and it sort of like evolved into a feature. It started off as a comedy, believe it or not.
Oh wow.
When I was I went to IU, and when I was there, I worked at the Union, the campus on hotel. Let me try to edit that, please. Okay, when I was at IU, I went to IU, and when I was there, I worked at the Union, which was the hotel on campus,
Mm-hmm.
and I sometimes I worked in the parking lot in the ticket booth, like let people in and out. But sometimes I was also like, just a page, okay, cool, people need towels, I'll go upstairs. And it was a weird, like, kind of cool old style, like old timey feeling building, and it was like supposedly haunted. So like when you're walking around like at midnight, like going upstairs to rooms in those dark halls, sometimes you had some like little like The Shining moments where I was like, I'm gonna turn around and see two little girls being like, come play with us. But I started like, I'm a very imaginative. Okay. I think I have an overactive imagination. I was about to say I'm an imaginative person. That sounds pretentious as hell, but I have a very overactive imagination. So, and I'm very good at entertaining myself. Like I'm very rarely bored. So I'd be walking around upstairs and just like, start dreaming up scenarios of what's going on behind the doors, and of course you think, oh, people are probably either sleeping or watching TV or having sex or whatever. And, but then I was like, nope, what if there's a hostage situation? What if, I started coming up with all these like really weird moments. Like, like you knock on the door and someone's going to open it and you think like, I'm like, someone just really going to ask for towels? Like, what if somebody like, opens the door and they're like all like, freaking out and crying and they're like, it's like, what happened? What was your night? So I don't really know like remember which of those tales I was like pulling from, but like just that idea of what's really happening in a room, and like, and then I started thinking like, okay, well, cool, I went up to this room before, but now someone else has checked in there. And it's like, it's the same thing as like if you buy a house, like what happened there before, the tenants that you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, good, bad, or ugly. And I started thinking, like what about like this shared history of this room and like this idea of like a room having a soul and like, maybe absorbing, it's just a little bit of a horror movie, I think, trope. But, like the idea of like, all that, like, not like, but I didn't want to go like Amityville horror, like, but like, all this becomes a part of that room, part of that character, so I started coming up with these scenarios of like, originally it was going to be like multiple rooms, like in a hotel complex. And like, it was going to be sort of like in a really, like, and I had this idea of, God, I wish I could remember them. But like, I remember there was one where there was like an assassin, like a hitman or something that was, trying to prep for a hit, but he kept getting distracted by the people next door that were having sex. So he kept calling the front desk to complain about they were being too loud. And like, how like, that ended up like saving someone's life. Like I had all these like little moments of like, there were like circumstance because of the people that were staying in this area. And then I narrowed it down to just like one room. I'm like, okay, cool. It's just everybody that stays in this one room, what happens over time.
Right.
And, I started thinking about, okay, cool. Well, something happens like, what if a gun goes off and then there's a bullet hole on the wall. And then all of a sudden the next time that someone else is checked in, one of those picture frames has moved to cover it, like, and so I started playing around with all these different little ideas of like, how a room could evolve and change and like, okay, cool, there was a murder in here. Well, they clean it up or whatever and get it, checked out. And then, now people can check in and stay in that room again.
Yeah.
As I was writing it, the comedy just kind of started to go away. Like originally I wanted to just be like a really like goofy, funny, dark comedy, kind of like Four Rooms, I guess is what I was thinking.
Yeah. And as soon as you were talking about your experience at hotel room, that was the first thing that came to mind was Four Rooms. And I think,
which is, like, oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I personally, it's been, I haven't seen it since I saw it in theaters. I know I wasn't a big fan of Four Rooms when it came out. I thought, there were some
I like 2 out of the 4 stories.
Yeah, like 2 out of 4 of them were good. But I think one of the things that I like that differentiates it from Four Rooms is the fact that you focus on the room. It's not just, and the fact that it's one single room. It's not just, a bellboy or somebody working at the room who's just going from room to room to room. The fact that it's one single room, and that's one of the interesting things about it. And the fact that you have this progression of like a pregnant mother at one point, and then later on you see their child check into the room, and you see this. You see a lot of this progression of that's a very natural arc, and it's a very interesting arc because of the fact that then you see everything in between, and yeah, it was such an interesting concept. I completely forgot what the concept of that movie was until I saw it. It's like, oh wow, yeah, this is structurally speaking, is really interesting.
Thank you. That was one that was actually like really like personal and important to me. Like I said, as the comedy kind of went away from it, I found myself sort of like uncomfortably in love with the characters and interested in where they were going. So rather than like originally, kind of like Forums, I was going to be like each scene with the characters, it was going to be a one and done. Like, the actors, like, those characters were in one scene and they never came back. But then I was like, well, what happened to the next? What if they checked into that? Say this was like the motel or hotel, like on a highway, it's like between two places or whatever, and it was like normal for these people to stay. I was like, well, I wanted to visit them again at different points in their life, and that's when I kind of came up with the family dynamic, where like you said, like you got the parents and child, and eventually, like you like what you realize, okay, well, two of the other ones are spoiler, like technically would be like the grandparents or whatever, like it just sort of like evolved from me wanting to see where these characters were that I was writing and falling in love with, and actually, not a lot of people know this, but I actually ended up getting a little uncomfortably personal with it. I always put a little bit of myself in things that I write and direct, but like not always on the surface. Sometimes I try to bury it a little bit, because it's vulnerable. But this one, for better or worse, like it was really important to me at the time. Still is, because like I came up with this kind of fictitious backstory that sort of I don't know. Like I'm adopted. And I came up with this dreamt up tragic, because who wants a happy ending? Tragic backstory to what like my biological parents, and that became the Brian and Sarah characters.
Yeah.
And sort of like like obviously like. Of course, that didn't happen. I just made something up, but like that was how I was able to relate to that. I was like, what would that be like if that were me? And come back and trying to figure out the history of what was going on, like who they were, and all you had was this picture with a room key, And that was once I kind of latched on to that and found that personal, emotional element, that helped me figure out where I wanted all the characters to go. So I ended up with this. Of course, I don't know how to do happy stories, but like I ended up making like this like really miserable story, but like I did that because it affected me. Like, I remember, this is the only time this has actually ever happened, but like the first time I watched like the final cut of the movie, I sat down like, sat down in my living room and like just did like a screening, like, to decide, is this done? And it made me cry pretty hard at the end. It was just the emotional component. The movie is not that good, but like that's sort of where that came from. I kept a little bit of the original comedic elements in there, like there was and it was much funnier in the original version, but there was a woman that hired a clown prostitute at one point.
Yeah,
that was the thing. She's like, I want you to dress up like a clown, but it was much goofier in the original one, and this one I was like, let's just make it kind of creepy sexy. So I don't know, but yeah, no, like it was a very, I mean, I think everything, I don't care what kind of artist you are, like, everything you make is definitely personal, but that one was very intensely personal at that time. Anyway, that's sort of roughly where that came from. I'm glad that the narrative structure worked for you. Like I always kind of question, I'm like, am I being too pretentious here? But like, like it made sense to me, so I liked it, but like I said, I have trouble looking at it now. So thank you for going back and watching it again.
Oh, no problem.
It's one of those where like it's actually streaming on Amazon Prime, and everybody's like, oh, I'm like, yeah, that's cool, don't watch it, but there it is. So but yeah, no, that was that one was like, at least at that time, it still is, pretty important to me.
Cool. Well, I mean, you did mention earlier that you have a couple of other projects you're working on right now. Any of them coming close to fruition that we can probably look out for?
There is the next feature, which we shot a while back, but it's called Emergence, and that one has been Oh, like 3 tears. I have this. I'm the next one. I'm definitely breaking out of it. But I had this trend where, like, on all 3 of my features thus far, I've hit some pretty monumental speed bumps in post production. I guess whatever cards on the table. But it was a Shade of Grey. Getting the sound mix was, yeah, like I bounced between like 4 or 5 different people before we finally, were able to get a sound mix, because we had like, the location audio was all just like the gear. We didn't know until after we shot was messed up. Again, learning experience, first film. So I had to like ADR the majority of it, and that, took post production like way longer than planned. 3 tears, the edit was very difficult, but also like, there were, a fair amount of effect shots that I had to outsource, and again, I had a sound mix. My regular sound mixer, he took a new job, and I had to, like, in the middle, like, as we were about to start it, I had to go find another one. So like there was post production plans just changed and caused delays, so that was a long road to get done. Same thing. Some of the effects and sound that we're working on Emergence have gone through some roadblocks. Actually, I'm sitting here talking about it, but we haven't officially announced the movie yet, so it's not like, oh, it's there and now it's delayed. But we're whatever. I'll talk with you about it, Brian. But we,
okay.
It's one I'm really excited about and very anxious to get out there. Like I said, had a few delays, but the goal is to have that out as soon as possible this year. We're just trying to figure out some of the final post elements, but the movie's all done and put together, and it's one I'm particularly proud of. It's my good friend Joe Atkinson wrote the script for this one, and it's awesome. But it's about a serial killer it's about the relationship between him and his first victim.
Okay.
And I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, it's really just about like the origin story of a serial killer picking his first victim, and just about, their dynamic, because it doesn't happen easily. So it's different, because it's not a horror movie. Everybody's like, oh, cool, it's a horror movie. Like, no, it's I hate psychological thriller. That's art house term for horror movie. But it's like Silence of the Lambs. That's a psychological thriller, so we can get the Oscar. It's a horror movie. Come on. But anyway, but this one is really more about like the relationship dynamics than it is like the actual like act. Like there's very little. Okay, I don't want to give too much away, but this one is, I think, pretty powerful, and I'm hoping it works for audiences. But that one's something to look forward to. I have a couple other ones that not to be vague or whatever, but I have 2 scripts that I'm toying with which one I want to make next. I'm hoping to get one of those into production this year. That's sort of
okay.
I guess you could say New Year's resolution or goal is to get Emergence out and get the next one like in front of cameras. So, but I've done a couple of things in between there. Like I did a short segment in that the first anthology, in the anthology series Volumes of Blood. I did a short in the first one for that, and I just released a new short film online actually the other week called Infectious. It was a short that I shot. So yeah, that's been on the shelf for a minute. A little over a year ago.
Okay.
Year and a half, and it was part of a larger project that hit a few stalls, and I, come New Year's, I was like, I'm putting it online, because it's been sitting there done, and I was like, I just want, everybody that worked on it, I was like, I want to show this off, so I was like, start the new year with a new short. So I put a new short that was originally part of a larger anthology. That's online now, and right now I've been taking a bit of a break doing some theater. I actually apparently got talked into acting into something. I acted in a local play here in Evansville. It was David Mamet's Oleana. It was an underground production of that. Okay. So I was in that, and now I'm directing the underground stage version of Killer Joe. So I'm pretty excited about that, because that's like one of my favorites. So we're deep in rehearsals on that right now, and it's going to open mid-February. So trying to keep busy, but I'm very anxious to get back to like a full feature film. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, definitely. I would definitely be interested in watching Emergence when you have that ready to show. And
you'll be on the first set of screener lists. So totally.
Yeah, definitely want to watch that. And before we wrap things up, you mentioned that Shave Gray is on Amazon Prime. Where can people watch Three Tears on Bloodstained Flesh?
It is available now everywhere DVDs are sold from Unearthed Films. So, I mean, yeah, Amazon, Best Buy, Target, Walmart, choose your poison. Like, go online, wherever you go online to buy movies, it's everywhere. In a pretty stacked 2-disc collector's edition. Like, I think, I think if you count the commentaries, there's like over 8 hours of bonus features on that thing. So we had like a really awesome behind the scenes. There's like a huge, way too long gag reel to show how many times we messed up. There's like, oh man, I could just grab one of the DVDs and read all the crap on the back, but there's like a handful of, what we have? Like, 21 deleted and extended scenes, 3 short films, including Obsolescence, that's on there, 4 music videos, audition videos, and then a couple commentaries. But yeah, that DVD is available everywhere. It should be on, it's not on Amazon or, I think it's supposed to be on Amazon and Google Play soon. There was it should be streaming shortly, but the DVD is available now. So
okay, yeah, it's funny because of the fact that earlier today, before we got to talking, I actually Cindy Maples, who you had been in her film Random with, she's actually in town doing editing on her new film. So I went over there to meet her and got to talking and stuff like that. We did a little impromptu interview. I got to see a bit of her editing her new short film, and yeah, they and her husband Rusty James, and then Jim Dougherty, who is doing the editing. They got to talking about Three Tears and the bonus features and stuff like that too. So yeah, that was pretty. It was pretty interesting how this weekend ended up, and the fact that I ended up getting to talk to you guys, both of you guys separately, but on the same day was really fun.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah. On that note, thank you for joining me. It was really great to talk to you and hear what you had to say about your film history, about your creative process. It was definitely a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure as always talking with you.
Oh, no problem. And yeah, definitely send Emergence my way. Just based on your basic plot premise, I'm very interested in seeing what that film has in store.
So. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to share it with you. Like I said, you'll be on the first part of the list of people to get to see it. So.
Thank you very much to Jakob Billinski for joining me today. It was a lot of fun talking to him and hearing him talk about his film career and what's inspired him along the way. If you want to check out some of Jacob's work, you can go to his YouTube page for Cinephreak, Cinephreak Pictures, and check out some of his films there. And thank you for joining me again for the Sonic Cinema podcast. This is Brian Scuttle, and until next time, thank you.